An Islamic terror attack leaves 3 dead in London last week. How vulnerable are we in the West? And what of the ongoing Christian persecution in the Middle East? National security and foreign policy expert at Fox News, Dr. WALID PHARES, will tell us. And later, we'll talk parenting and family life with clinical psychologist and host of The Doctor Is In on EWTN Radio, Dr. Ray GUARENDI. Then we'll get story-oriented. First, with the editor of CatholicMom.com and author of the Chime Travelers series, HENDEY. Then Ken Burns drops in to talk about his new book about the U.S. presidents and much more. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. WALID PHARES, Dr. Ray GUARENDI, and HENDEY are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be live tweeting throughout the show, or you can email me at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get started. Last week, 4 people, including a police officer, were killed and at least 50 injured in an attack by a Muslim convert near Parliament in England. The perpetrator, Khalid Massoud, was killed by police. As ISIS seems to be inspiring more and more of these lone wolf attacks, how vulnerable are we in the United States? And would the travel ban proposed by Donald Trump's administration keep these kinds of attacks at bay? What of the ongoing persecution of Christians in the Middle East? Here with analysis, I'm joined by the national security and foreign policy expert at Fox News and former foreign policy advisor to the president, Dr. WALID PHARES. Welcome back.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you for having me.
Let's start. What does this attack, another lone wolf attack, represent? What's the message here?
Well, first of all, we're going to see more of these. We've seen the same before. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in the United States. And of course, in the Middle East. These jihadists, if I may say, because that's what they are declaring, wants to send a message to their own base and constituency that they can shut down something, a street, a parliament, an institution, maybe not the entire city, of course, or the country, but they are sending a message for recruitment and for radicalization.
They don't call it terrorism for nothing. I mean, it's to strike terror in people's hearts and as you say, blockade whole swaths of a city. And it does cause a paralysis. I mean, people just freak, and it's a terrible thing. Now, they have been for years, I'm talking about ISIS, who did take credit for this attack. They have for years been urging their people, get in a car, grab a knife, grab a machete, take a pail if you have to, just go and kill as many people as you can. Is this really, they're saying this guy is one of their soldiers. Is he really?
Well, he's a soldier of the ideology which has been produced way before ISIS. I mean, the jihadist ideology has been produced with Al-Qaeda, with many groups around the world. It comes from the old generations of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Salafi jihadists. But basically, when ISIS shows on the ground in the Middle East that it is standing, it has a caliphate, it would incite and encourage these individual jihadis in the West to start acting. And at the same time, when they act, it's going to encourage also more people to join ISIS on the ground. It is mutually, profitable.
How do we in the West and in the United States particularly, how do we counteract this? Is there counter-propaganda that we should be doing? How do we deal with the predominantly, and these are coming from Muslim communities, mostly youths, what's the answer here?
Well, he's a convert, but many are coming from communities where the jihadists are penetrating. See, the issue is not the community, it's the movement. And that movement is able to penetrate because, number one, we need to stop them. Number two, we need to counter them. And I have always advocated the idea of Western governments working with Muslim reformer NGOs. This is your first line of defense on the inside. So you have counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and a war of ideas. The war of ideas, we haven't done very well yet with it.
And what's the end game? Why encourage these lone wolf, one-off attacks, a guy driving a truck or like this guy driving the thing and then, stabbing people, going on a spree? What's the end game here? What is ISIS attempting to do aside from just lock down a part of the city or show its strength?
Well, perpetuating the movement and aggrandizing the size. For example, what did it cost them? A man, one person, one car, and one knife, right? And it has really shaken off a whole city, or even with the cameras and the crews around the world. So they are waging a psychological warfare to counter them. What is very important here is basically to stop them from becoming jihadists before they act. And this is where we have not been very successful.
I want to show you, this is the British advisor on terrorism in London. His name is An Baba. And this is his solution. Listen to this. I want your reaction. Roll it.
Actually, the way to tackle this extremism and any other form of extremism is actually to engage in the conversation between a lot of the frustrated communities and have a positive dialogue on how the two communities can find, any aggrieved communities can find common ground.
Is there common ground here between Western civilization and these one-off attackers, these radicalized young people?
The mistake made in the West by many academics and, of course, in the media, and that translates even sometimes to the bureaucracies, is we talk about a community. We don't talk about a movement. I mean, if you engage with the community, who are you engaging with? Are you engaging with the representative of the extremists or with the counter-jihadists? My critique has been both here and in Europe that we have abandoned those who have been fighting the jihadists to the advantage of those who are protecting them intellectually and politically.
What about the Trump travel ban? We've been seeing a lot of coverage of this lately. The president tried to get this executive order through once before. The court stopped him. He revised it, in his terminology, watered it down so that it could get through the courts. Guess what? Two more courts have weighed in. One affirmed it, the other blocking. Will this do the job, stopping this sort of jihadi attack in the future?
You know, Raymond, here's my take on the whole philosophy or doctrine of the ban. Number one, this is only a stage in a complex process. The ban by itself is only a stage. You are just shutting down an entrance to a particular type of countries. But you have to explain to the public why. You have to explain who is in those 7 or 6 countries or 5. You have to make sure that the public in the United States understand that there are jihadi networks who are using these countries, that you have allies in these countries. We have developed bridges to Egypt, to the Gulf, you know, to many societies in the region. These forces have to be seen by the American public to understand that we're doing it with the Arab and Muslim world.
Will the travel ban make a difference, assuming it gets court's muster and can pass through the court system?
Travel ban, if it goes through, number one, you have to win the battle against ISIS in the Middle East in at least 3 to 4 countries. Number two, you have to make sure that you are countering the networks here. Number three, you are bringing awareness to your allies in those countries. So citizens need to understand that the travel ban is one stage in many other, much more sophisticated.
Both the United States and the UK recently outlawed electronic items in airplane cabins from 6 predominantly Muslim countries. Were you surprised by that? Is this targeting one group of countries to the exclusion of others? And why just these Muslim countries?
See, the narrative is always an issue here. We call them, you know, we are banning from Muslim countries. No, we are banning those laptops. It could be anybody coming from these countries, going through these countries. Basically, the government got information from one of the raids, without going into the details, that this is going to be used against the United States. And you realize that not many people have opposed it because it's technological. It's based on information, and it may not be for a long period of time because meanwhile the U.S. and its allies are developing the technologies to spot it. This is a race between the jihadists and the West about technology. Every time they discover 1 inch of breach, we will have to stop it and then bypass it.
Wow. And so this is a constant, I mean, this is a moving target.
Race, absolutely.
Talk about the Battle of Mosul for a moment, what we're seeing in Syria, a lot of attention and concern for the Christians, the Yazidis in the region. These are the minorities who have been forced to flee. I mean, they've destroyed their homeland in so many ways. What is the solution here? We have 3,000 troops now on the ground in Mosul. They seem to be making advances, and in Raqqa, against ISIS. What's the answer here for these minority religious groups?
Raymond, we've spoken about the persecution of Christian minorities and Yazidis, about the genocide that has been declared by the State Department and the United Nations. This is the window of opportunity for the international community led by the United States and the Europeans and all our Arab moderates to find a solution, and we could be very close. Look, we are helping the Iraqis to free Mosul and the province around it. Among that province, are the actual Christian areas of Nineveh, the Yazidis in Sinjar. So what is needed right now is that international forces would be protecting those zones. It doesn't have to be American, it could be European, it could be international, and then inviting these Christian minorities who are in exile in Kurdistan and tell them to come back, and then you organize them. Same could go for Syria. When we liberate Raqqa, there are many Christian areas that you could protect. So now is the time to be smart and to create those protected zones.
To keep them in the region at least, not have them flee to other parts of the world.
Well, first you have to bring them to the zone.
Right.
They are very close to the zone. Bring them in, keep them in, protect them, train them, equip them with all they need, organize their municipalities, and then you go to the political solution.
Who would do this? Would the government, would the United States and a coalition, NATO, who would do this?
We have the largest coalition that just met a few days ago, and last week at least, here in Washington, D.C., and every partner was saying, well, give us more support, give us more support. This is the time to tell all our partners, if you want our support, you want to also help those weak minorities within your own countries to survive, and this is the way we're going to help you.
We haven't seen much of an appetite to do that yet. I mean, I've spoken to people who've gone and visited these Christians in the UN camps. These refugee camps are nothing more than actually targeting facilities, because this small community is then surrounded by people who attack them in the camps.
That's right.
So they really have no safe haven. What do we do, and who's leading that charge?
There is a little bit of disorganization in the general camp that is raising the issue of Middle East Christians. We hold great conferences here in Congress with the NGOs and the foundations, and we talk about the principle. We want to protect them, we want to defend them, but then give me a plan on the ground.
Right.
And we are now giving a plan that State Department, DOD, White House, both parties are on this. So this is the only thing, at least in Washington at this point in time, where we could have a unity of both parties supporting this initiative.
So this could be the moment.
This could be and should be the moment.
Take a wider view. Give people a wider sense of what's at stake here. As we watch what happened in really the collapse of the Middle East, and we're seeing these refugees stream into Europe, is this the beginning or the end of this refugee crisis as we've known it over the last few years? Do you see it, the tide of these refugees stemming, or no?
Brilliant question, Raymond. Basically, it's going to allow me to give you two answers. Number one, it could be very worse, or it could be the beginning of the solution. And all has to do about who is going to control the areas freed from ISIS. If it's going to be sectarian militias linked to, for example, in this case, to Iran and to the extremist Shia militias, or to Hezbollah, then, my friend, you're going to expect millions and millions of Sunnis hitting the ground, going to Turkey and into Europe. So we have to be very understanding that the solution here is to make sure that moderates will be in charge of the areas liberated. If we make that mistake, as we've done in Iraq in 2011, 2012, we are going to see the next war, the next wave of migrants.
Wow. And how is Europe reacting? We see in the Brexit afterglow, there seems to be a real hue and cry, at least from the British that I've spoken with over the last few months. They want those borders secured. They do not want their British identity slipping away from them. Not that they don't care for these refugees or their well-being, but they feel, look, we have a limited, we're just a little island out here, and we can't afford to let everybody in.
Look, the intellectual elites, you know, there and here, they are concerned about their concepts. It's more virtual, that we have refugees, we need to have all the refugees. They don't understand what is causing these waves, and they do not want to give ideas as how to resolve it. The public in general has good heart, they want to help, but at the same time they are afraid. The governments at this point in time understand that they need to solve it in the Middle East. That's why I see more Europeans, French, British, Eastern Europeans, Hungarians, Poles, ready to help in Iraq and in Syria to secure these enclaves, and also to help with civil societies. If you stop it in the Middle East, if you stop the drama in the Middle East, you don't have to have this crisis in Europe.
Right. The refugee crisis suddenly vanishes. And again, people are entitled to live in their homeland.
Yes.
They shouldn't be expelled and have to live in a diaspora somewhere. WALID PHARES, as always, thank you for the insights.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again soon. When we return, we'll talk about the pitfalls of modern-day parenting with EWTN radio host Dr. Ray GUARENDI. When the World Over continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. My next guest is a clinical psychologist and longtime host of The Doctor Is In on EWTN Radio. He's also the father of 10 adopted children and author of the classic Discipline That Lasts a Lifetime. I sat down with him recently in our D.C. studio to talk about the dangers children and parents face from social media to technology. How do we shield our kids from the worst of what's out there and live happy and healthy lives? Here's my interview with Dr. Ray GUARENDI. Dr. Ray, thanks for being here.
Raymond, I have one question.
Oh, gosh. Now, I'm asking questions. You respond to questions, but I will stand down for this one moment. Go
Why
ahead.
do you have a teleprompter and I don't?
Well, because I'm a trained professional, and you're not.
Okay.
But let's start with, you don't use a teleprompter ever on your show.
No.
So, but you're also dealing, it's also a free-form monologue.
Not in the intro.
That you are very accustomed to.
Not
giving.
in the intro, in the outros, and the closes.
Well, see, some people can get on that high wire. I like to have a little pole in my hand when I do so. So that's what the teleprompter is. If you think that saves you, I can point to you to people who have teleprompters. They are lousy on television. If you'd like names, I'll give them to you. But let's start with this, more importantly. Social media, kids on social media, I was stunned to learn 39% of kids as young as 8 are on social media, and a full 56% of kids 8 to 13 are on Facebook. You're not supposed to be on Facebook unless you're 13 and older. They're blowing through these prohibitions. The dangers, from your perspective, of letting a child on social media is what?
And this is why I do not see children in therapy. I see their parents. The problem is the wholesale surrender of the parents. The children are dictating. I'd like this. 72.65% of my friends have this. Mother.
Yeah.
Parents are afraid of making their kids a technological outcast.
Right.
They are afraid of the grief that they get from other people, including grandparents.
Oh.
They go with the cultural flow. Raymond, it is similar to giving a 3-year-old a machine gun.
Wow. And is it because of the narcissism you're feeding, the overexposure? What is it? I mean, from your perspective, as a trained professional
That doesn't
in this
need a
area,
teleprompter.
who doesn't need a teleprompter,
Two factors.
What is it?
2 factors. One, you have to have a steel rod through your spine, an inch thick, to stand against the cultural flow. You do.
Yeah.
Parents bend like wheat to it. Secondly, it's available. Yeah. It is available. It should be. And what is happening? It just in the short time I've been a psychologist, well, some might not say it's real short, but in the time I've been a psychologist, I have watched the age just creep back all the way to 6, 7, and 8. Yeah. I used to scream and say, no, 14-year-olds should not have this. Oh, now I'd be Neanderthal.
And why limit it? Because I know people who look, they're just posting pictures. This is how they interact,
Yes,
Dr. Ray.
yeah.
This is how they meet friends and maintain friendships. If they're not there, they really are ostracized and cut out. This is how people date even when they're older. They use social media, they use texting and the phones.
This is why I have to give them an iPhone 22 so I can contact them when they're in practice. Yeah. This is what we do. We find a reason to allow, but we don't supervise and be vigilant. A friend of mine, Matt Fradd, who does a lot of talks on pornography, he says when you hand your kid that iPhone or that Droid or whatever it is, you are handing him total access to every bit of pornography that's available. You want to hear an interesting stat?
Yeah.
11 to 19-year-olds. How many do you think have come across pornography accidentally or on purpose? 11 to 19.
Oh, how the percentage?
Percentage.
Accidentally?
Or on purpose?
Or on purpose? 80%?
90.
70? 90%.
90.
Wow.
11 to 19. I tell parents, first of all, you have to be confident enough to stand alone. Okay? That's simple. Secondly, you need to get the best screening devices you can get. You can even get them on phones now.
Right.
I can't tell you how many good Catholic parents operate under the idea, I trust my child. My child wouldn't do that. Raymond, it's like a conveyor belt going by in front of you that is essentially saying to the child, pick that, do that, pick that. And let us just say that they don't do something vile. What about the social aspect?
Right.
You know, one second. No, I'm on the world over with Raymond. I'll be back. Okay, I just had to see if it was somebody more important than you.
I understand.
That's exactly what it is. It's the new remote. You know how husbands used to sit and see what else is on?
Right.
Well, I want to see who else
I could interact with here.
Exactly.
There's also a very dark underbelly to this thing. I was reading a story, I think it was in Dallas, where a sex trafficker saw a little girl's picture. She's in a cheerleading outfit, so he figures out which school she's a part of, and it's listed in the description. And she's standing in front of her mother's new car with a license plate on it. And with that information, this sex trafficker targets this young girl, follows her to school one day, and abducts her. They still haven't found this young lady. These are the kinds of terrifying things that are out there. And I mean, parents should at least know, don't take pictures in front of houses, addresses, your car, the license. Incriminating and private information that you're seeding, with knowledge or not, could be putting your kids in enormous danger.
Technology gallops ahead of people's ability to deal with it. It's that simple. What is now available, we've all become our grandparents.
Right.
I can't keep up with what my kids can do. I will tell you, Raymond, how many parents in my office say to me, I got blindsided. I can't believe the picture she sent out. I can't believe that she says she's in love with this 14-year-old kid, and she's turned on us because they're simply underestimating the shaping power of that stuff.
So what would you say? Keep them off of devices till what age? Personal devices.
15, 16, 17? Absolutely. Now, parents will say, but I want to get a hold of them. Get them a flip phone.
Right.
Or get them something from Walmart.
Right.
Or the argument that the kids say, I'm the only one without a phone. Well, good. You can borrow one of your friends.
Right. They all
got one.
Okay, I want to talk about this. This is kind of a funny, well, it's not too funny. If it were my family, it wouldn't be funny. There is a new pattern developing of people taking, and funeral directors are actually instructing mourners at funerals, do not take funeral selfies in front of the deceased, where people are literally taking selfies with the body behind them. 36%, a third of British mourners in Britain take funeral selfies. You can only imagine how high the numbers must be here.
When I was in grad school, about 4 years ago.
Oh, sure.
We had the self-image movement. The self-image said, you need to be feeling good about yourself. You need to know that you're unique just like everybody else.
Right.
Selfies are a classic example of the self-image movement. Social media. How many likes do you get, Raymond? Do you get 1,012 likes? That is the technological sticker system. That's what it is. I will take me in any picture, anywhere, as long as I'm there.
Right.
And then I can put it out. It is a temptation that many cannot resist.
Yeah. Well, I also think if you don't have something that you're sharing with people that actually has utility in their life, information, a breaking news event, a product or something they need, stay off of social media. You're not that interesting. And I say that to myself, too. You're not, I mean, I don't put pictures of my children on social media anywhere, never have. You know, just because I'm in the public eye doesn't mean they should be. In fact, I think it's detrimental to have them there. Yet, I see people all the time. They take pictures with the family. They take, you know, I never could understand that. Maybe I'm doing what we're about to discuss. Maybe I overparent my children. Can you overparent? I've been reading this, and people say you can overparent your children. Is that a possibility?
The most common overparenting I see is overthinking. Overanalyzing, second guessing. If I leave him on the potty for 4 minutes too long, he's going to become a tattooed face motorcycle gang member on Springer. All right? This is this kind of insecurity, this guilt, this, I can't be the parent in my own home because what if I do something wrong, Raymond? The experts have really undercut parents.
And what can you do? I mean, in your new book, you really discuss ignoring so much of the popular advice we see and read out there. What's the most destructive advice that parents imbibe and use every day?
Good parents?
Good parents.
Psychological correctness.
What does that mean?
It says there are certain psychologically appropriate ways to raise children.
Oh, I thought you were going to say to beat your children.
No,
go on.
raise children.
Raise them.
And if you don't do this, not only could your child be emotionally stunted, but don't say, we didn't warn you about all the bad things that can happen because I'm going to spout that. And the net effect of all of this, Raymond, is parents who can't control a 3-year-old. I see this all the time. They're coming to me, my 3-year-old is totally out of control. I can't take him anywhere. I can't go to mass. I mean, I can see a person struggling with a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
But a 3-year-old, as I said, I do not see children. I see their parents.
What do you do, and we got an email about this, with the child who can't handle disappointment, and the parent tries to make up for the disappointments in life, whether it's losing a game or you didn't get that place on the team or whatever it is. What is the best approach for a parent to adopt? They have to learn to lose sometimes, yes?
You give them a hug, you give them a kiss, and you say, hey, buddy, this kind of stuff's going to happen. One of the things I always told my son right before a basketball game, the other parents were kissing him and going, you tried hard. I always go, Petey, try not to stink the joint out. And he'd laugh and go out there and play relaxed. That is not where his value lies.
Accomplishing something on the field.
I would even tell parents, this sounds like child-rearing heresy in the middle of the self-image movement. Hey, son, it's okay. You don't have to be that good at this. It's all right. God's not going to say, you're Michael Jordan? Well, come on in.
Right. Yeah, no, you get a pass for this sort of thing. There's been a lot of reportage about the order of children and how that affects them. I read a piece today in the New York Post. The firstborn child is the one with the highest intelligence.
That is a slight generality.
Okay.
A slight. I tell parents part of the reason is we change our styles. The first kid, you boil everything. He comes within 50 feet of the last kid, you throw him a big dirt ball. Chew on this. Wipe your mouth off in the gas can before you come in the house.
Yeah.
We change our styles. That's about the only place where birth order holds. You've heard of middle child syndrome?
Yeah, I was about to ask you.
Raymond, you got 3 kids.
I do. I do.
You have a middle child.
I noticed.
If you had 4, you'd have an upper middle, lower middle.
Oh, I'd have 2 middle
that's
children.
That's exactly
See,
right.
that I knew I should have done. I could have harassed more than one.
There is no such thing as middle child syndrome. It is a pop diagnosis.
And that's the idea that the child in the middle is regressed, lost,
yes.
insecure, doesn't quite fit in, doesn't know how to. I mean, I have to tell you, my son in the middle, he's going to be like a comedian. I mean, he's the biggest mouth in the house. But
do the math. You got 3 kids. You're going to have one that's probably going to be a little more insecure, maybe a little lost. That could be your youngest, your oldest. 33% chance it's going to be the middle child.
With Rebecca and I as parents, none of them are that
I've seen your
character.
children. They all have twitches.
Yeah, they do. These are not shy, retiring children, sadly, on many days. That's what I think. What is the piece of advice that parents ignore that they should take notice of in their daily habits of rearing a child, no matter the age?
Discipline should last a lifetime. If you're going to teach a child the things like self-control, responsibility, this is something you got to do for 20 years. Okay, and Raymond, you have an 18-year-old, right?
Right.
Is he still in your basement?
No, he's still ruling the roost.
Okay, he's got upper floors, right?
You bet.
As a parent, people will say to me, can you be your child's best friend? And I say, you'd better be, but you better be the parent first. Then you can be the best friend. You try to be the best friend first, you're not going to get friend or parent.
No. Good advice. And that is advice not worth ignoring. But the book is called Advice Worth Ignoring by a man who you should never ignore, Dr. Ray GUARENDI.
Thank you,
for
Raymond.
being here. Fantastic. Thank you. You can find out more about Dr. Ray by visiting his website, and guess what it is? drray.com. I should have thought of that. You can listen to The Doctor Is In on EWTN Radio every Monday through Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. You'll learn a lot and laugh as well. Coming up, author and mom Lisa HENDEY is here to talk about storytelling and the difference between writing for kids and adults when The World Over Live returns in a moment. Stay with us.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. You might remember my next guest from a recent appearance in which she interviewed me about the second book in my Will Wilder adventure series. But tonight, the spotlight is on her. She's a blogger and editor of CatholicMom.com, as well as the author of the Chime Travelers series for kids. I sat down with her to discuss storytelling, the differences and the similarities of writing for kids and adults. Here's my interview with Lisa HENDEY. Lisa, I want to start with CatholicMom.com, which you are so known for. I mean, you're the blogger extraordinaire out there. How did this start? You started the site when you were still a stay-at-home mom.
In the year 2000, as an answer to John Paul the Great's call to the new evangelization, but really because I was a mom of a second grader. I went to his religious education sacrament prep and was told by his second grade teacher, you are the primary faith formator of your child. And so for whatever reason, instead of going and buying the catechism, I thought, I'm going to make a website and learn about how to do this properly.
So it was kind of, at the time, it was sort of a help me and let's help each other sort of site.
A desire to find a community of other mothers who I knew were like me, that, you know, I'd grown up a cradle Catholic, yet there was so much to learn in order to share the faith with my children. I didn't start it because I had all the answers. I was seeking community, and that's still what we seek on the site.
Who populates the site today? Who visits?
We are so blessed. This last year we had visitors from over 170 countries around the world. Our writing team is all volunteers, and that's moms, but also dads, priests, religious, college students, and we have over 150 volunteer writers on the site.
Unbelievable.
So it's a great team effort, and just that, a team. Hopefully, if you come now, you won't know it's Lisa's site because it belongs to all of us.
Wow. And you still run it? Are you still running the site? You're
Yes,
editor-in-chief?
Absolutely, but thank goodness for my on-the-ground editor, Barb Shishkevitz, who is there when I'm doing fun things like this. She's there to be the mainstay of the site.
I love it. Well, tell me now, where did the book thing come from? You've written several books since then.
Yes.
How did that pop out?
I'm so blessed that Ave Maria Press, my publisher, came to me around 2008 with the idea to begin creating some resources for Catholic mothers, and asked me, you know, what would you like to write about? And so really at that point we launched a partnership that now is a book in print with Ave. We have 11 Catholic mom books and growing, and I've written a few of those. And those are books aimed to serve mothers at all different stages of life, to encourage them in their vocation to motherhood.
There was a particular book, The Grace of Yes, that I read when it came out. And that book is, I think, so important because you have a second chapter, you know, near the end, you have The Grace of No.
Right.
Tell us about that book, what its general idea is and the way it was received.
You know, it really looks to emulate Mary's yes. You do this in your own way, Raymond, but a way for us to actually give our yes to what God is calling each of us uniquely to. And my idea with this is that if we give that yes every day consistently, that by the very nature of that we become generous spirits in the world around us. And I'm not talking about financial generosity, I'm talking about something even deeper, which is our yes to being Christ-loved to the world around us. So an important concept and something I try to commit myself to every day.
Now, I want to move on to this series of books, the Chime Travelers series, C-H-I-M-E Travelers, for those only getting the audio. Where did the idea of writing for kids come from?
I have a dear devotion to St. Patrick, and this story was born in the backyard with my young nephew named Patrick. So we sat on a backyard swing talking to him about what could happen if he could travel in time and meet his patron saint, and it turned into this beautiful series where my brother and sister twins travel in time and meet different saints at seminal times in their path to sainthood and learn from them lessons that they can apply to
Their own
ordinary
lives.
kid problems, things
Yeah.
that are happening in today's modern world.
And there's a device you use throughout all the books where the kids are usually visiting a church or a monastery or something, and it is a chime that allows them to travel back in time. It's a rhyme.
Initially, the ringing of the Angelus bells. Part of my whole hope with this is to help kids fall in love with many of the wonderful aspects of our church. So bells are such a relevant part of the Mass, of liturgies, of call to prayer, and so it's the chiming of bells that gets them to and fro. But they can't come back from the chime travel until they've learned a lesson.
What type of research did you undertake to do this? Because writing for children is not like writing for adults, as I've learned.
They're much harsher critics.
You bet. And more immediate. No filter, those little ones.
Absolutely not. If they don't like it, they don't pull any punches.
Yeah.
So obviously diving deeply into the saints' lives, but there are illustrations in the book as well. There are chapter books aimed at 7 to 10-year-olds, but to make the illustrations relevant, a lot of historical research as well. For example, what did St. Francis's garb look like at the time that he lived? Not what we might see on a holy card, but what it really looked like. So diving deep into what things looked like, smelled like, felt like.
How did you go about choosing the saints? I mean, St. Clare is here, St. Francis, St. Patrick. I'm missing some.
Yeah,
Hold
St.
on.
Kateri. And then
and the Holy Family
the
shows
Holy
up.
Family at Christmas. And, really, I mean, Patrick had to be my first. He's my personal patron. I love St. Kateri. Francis and Clare go together. And then the story of the greatest saints of all, the story of the Holy Family at the Nativity, is just, it was a beautiful gift for me to write that story.
And what have you learned? Because I find you learn so much when you talk to children and spend time with them, particularly after they've read a book or when they're in the process of reading it. What did you discover as you visited schools?
I have two messages for the kids. The first is that each of us is a saint in the making, that we're each created and called by God uniquely to be on our path to sainthood. The second is that each of us is a storyteller. So we're all called with our own gifts to tell the greatest story of all, which is the story of God's love for us. And the more I talk to kids about that, the more convinced I am myself that I'm just getting started with this. So it's really fun.
Do you want to continue the series, will you?
I'd love to. If not this series, then other projects for kids, because I think there's a great need for great literature. I hate to call this literature. Hopefully it's on the path to being that. But a real need to call our kids to the gift of reading and to an understanding of their faith through the prism of art. So it's a blessing to be a part of that process.
How long does it take you to write one of these books?
About, I'd say 3 months. So a month is spent maybe pondering, staring off into space, praying, researching, and then 2 months of active craziness where I'm hearing voices in my head and transcribing their dialogue and really, working out story issues. The issue of time travel as of, fantasy, what you deal in, creates interesting situations that we have to work our way through.
Yeah, you have to create rules and try to stick to them. You can create the rules, but then you have to live by them. That's the hard part.
Developing a mythology that can go on and on. So kids who have read the stories notice that I have little hints about potential future stories, flashbacks, flash forwards. So,
Did you? Is there? When you decided to have two characters, why two? Why just the brother and sister?
So the story started off with Patrick, and it's so natural for me to have Patrick and Katie, twins, fraternal twins, who kind of complement each other in their strengths and weaknesses. And initially, the two twins are kind of alternating the stories. They're both present in each, but their relationship to the saints alternates. And then in book 5, we see them together chime traveling for the first time.
Yeah, that's right. That's the first time they actually go as a unit. When you start one of these books, how much outlining do you do?
Well, I think, possibly you did this in your work as well, but I have a beginning and an end, and some of what the middle plans to be is there, but there are always little twists and turns along the way.
As you write.
Because I'm trying to be very relevant and sticking with the saints' original history. So, for example, in The Secret of the Shamrock, the prose is related largely to St. Patrick's Confessio, his own words about his story. So I really tried to basically make that story in modern day and then put a little redheaded twin into the middle of it, but stay true to the story as it actually happened in St. St. Patrick's own words.
Do you find that difficult?
It is, because sometimes there are things. So, for example, with St. Kateri, who was such a prayer warrior, but also had very stringent prayer practices, to make it understandable for a young child to take the best parts of her life, but then also maybe shelter them from some things that might be challenging for younger children.
Yeah, so we're not going to have a visit with St. Stephen.
No, maybe not.
Archery, they'll be in an archery contest, and there's St. Stephen.
No, although I do dream someday about a Mother Angelica presence, and there is a book, and a character in book number 4, Angelica the cat, named for Mother.
Aha, so you worked her in.
In Claire's story. It was important to pay tribute to Mother. And I'd love to do a book on St. Teresa of Calcutta. You know, so many modern saints that John Paul II would be an amazing story to tell. So.
So there are many. I sense you're going to do more of these.
I hope so. Will you please pray for me, and to the kids out there too? I just ask for prayers of discernment about what God has planned for the series. Because with all my work, I never plan too far ahead. It's like, we'll see what God has in mind for
What
this.
is your preference, writing for adults or kids?
At this point, I'm in love with this kind of writing. I love nonfiction, but I feel the need to space my adult nonfiction work a little bit. I don't want to just write for the sake of writing. I want to really be at a point where I feel I have something to offer my readers, and more importantly, the church. So I stagger those books a little bit because it's important to go back to the well and see what God has for me.
Lisa Hendey, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Raymond.
Pleasure to see you. Lisa Hendey's Chime Travelers series is available at bookstores everywhere and online. And our story-ended segment continues tonight with award-winning filmmaker Ken Burns. Of course, he's known around the world for his amazing public television documentaries. And he also has a new book, a children's book called Grover Cleveland Again, a Treasury of American Presidents. I met with him for a moment to talk about that book, and we ended up revealing the story that drives America's storyteller. Watch this interview with Ken Burns. Ken, tell me, you have really become America's storyteller in so many ways. What was it that drove you down this path? What was it?
Actually, loss. My mother got cancer when I was about 1.5 years, 2 years old. She died when I was 11, and my father, who'd shown no emotion at her illness or death, obvious emotion, let me stay up late at night after she died to watch movies. And I watched my dad cry for the first time. I was 12 years old, and I said, I get it. I understand that film was a way that provided people with an emotional outlet, an emotional safe harbor. And so I vowed right then at 12 that I'd be a filmmaker. So it's really based, in some ways, as so much of our lives is, on struggle and grief and other things that advance us, that make us. And if you think about who I am, I wake the dead. I'm interested in making Jackie Robinson and Abraham Lincoln and other people come alive. Who do you think I'm really trying to wake up, right?
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. So childhood is so, I think, as you alluded to, it shapes all of us.
Of course.
What were the books or the stories or the one story that changed your life?
Well, you know, I think that just as I made a film on the national parks, and it's great to stand at the Grand Canyon, but it's really important to stand at the Grand Canyon with somebody you love. So it's not so much the book as the fact that my dad read me a book called The Princess and the Goblin, or he got me this encyclopedia at the supermarket, just a kid's encyclopedia, but I couldn't wait for the next volume, and I would just read it. Everybody else was reading novels and stories, and I was reading encyclopedia and falling in love, I didn't know, with American history.
Wow. Tell me about Grover Cleveland Again. Why a picture book on the presidents for kids?
So I have 4 daughters, ranging from age 35 to 5, 6, and when they get to be 5 years old, I sort of, after I read them a bedtime story, I lie in bed with them and I recite the presidents. And then they start to learn them. So I say George, they say Washington. I say John, they say Adams. So after my first daughter got up and she got, you know, I say Grover, Cleveland, Benjamin, Harrison, Grover, Cleveland again, she said, so proud of that. And I said, we need to do a children's book. And then the next daughter, same thing, and I said, we need to do a children's book. Then I had another family, an 11-year-old, and she got it this a few years ago. And then my 5-year-old, I said, we've got to do it. So we finally did it as a way to celebrate the people. You know, we're not, we deal with things like race and money and scandal, but we're not involved with anything other than saying who they were, the sort of rudimentary biographical stuff. You can do a book report from it, from the 2nd to the 3rd to the 6th or even the 10th grade from these pages. But you also know what their pets are, who their siblings were.
Right. How important is that kind of American cultural literacy, and are we losing that?
We're losing it tremendously, and there are fewer and fewer things as we live in an electronic world that stitch us together. I mean, that's what we do. There are people of diverse backgrounds agree to cohere because we subscribe to some things in our history. But if we lose that history, then we forget why we subscribe, and it makes us susceptible to the demagogues, the people that can appeal to the lowest common denominator rather than what we share in common. Right. The historian Arthur Schlesinger said today, we suffer from too much pluribus and not enough unum, and I'm about unum.
That's a great line. Final question. What would you tell or advise parents about trying to inspire and instigate literacy among their children, including cultural literacy?
Yeah, well, it's just have to read. You just have to expose. We know for a fact, sociologists tell us, that a child born into poverty by the age 3 has heard 30 million fewer words than those of us more fortunate who are able to read to our children every night. That is a deficit that is going to be extraordinarily hard to make up. We have to realize that even among those who have that privilege, we have to constantly remind them of the variety of things they can learn, not just in science and technology, engineering and mathematics, but in the arts and in religion, in all sorts of things in our lives that change us. You know, we like to say that 1 and 1 is 2, and you'll get a good grade if you say that. But the thing we're most interested in is when 1 and 1 equals 3. We find that in our faith, we find that in our art, we find that in our love and our relationships. That's where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. If the sum of the parts are here, the whole's here. Our mystery, life, is what's that?
I love that. Such a great honor to meet you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are also at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to join us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.